Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Omega Ronin The Podcast, which will have to suffice until we get Omega Ronin, the flamethrower. It hasn't been invented yet, but I hear the kids are going to love it. I know that I will. Welcome to the Omega Ronin fans out there. Welcome to the new listeners who have no idea what this is yet. And of course, welcome to the classic Game Room fans who stopped by to see what nonsense this is from the future. The future where 1982 is forever. This is episode number 1. And my plan is to take you on a journey through sound and music and the creation process and the business side of making, selling, streaming, and marketing your music. Alright then, now let's start this off with a clip from an Omega Ronin song so you can put a face to the name, so to speak. This is Absence of Your Reality. There you go, that's a little bit of Absence of Your Reality, which is on the EP Space War. And that's war spelled with 2 R's, because of course it is. Omega Ronin is electronic music, floating somewhere in between synthwave, electronica, industrial, cinematic, dark wave, video game music, and whatever else I decide to come up with that day. You know, there's really no boundaries. There's no reason to stick with one genre. I mean, why bother? Life is too short to stick with one genre. I'm not going into country or anything. But as far as electronic genres go, I may as well just start making up my own stuff. But I'll talk about my influences and all that kind of stuff throughout the podcast here. And also, I probably should start, for those of you who don't know me, who have no idea what I'm talking about, who have no idea what Omega Ronin is, it's approaching its 2-year anniversary here. It's early in 2024 as I'm recording it. Sadly, not 1982. But hey, I remember 1982. I remember 1979. A little bit of it. I'm from 75. I just recorded a podcast about a classic Game Room podcast about the Jaws pinball machine and mentioned that my mom was actually pregnant with me when she saw Jaws in the theaters. And she claims that's why I'm all kinds of screwed up. So, like I said, I'll take that as a compliment. It's a good movie. One of my favorites. My name is Mark Bussler. I'm the artist behind Omega Ronin and a bunch of other stuff. Been in the publishing and producing business for over 25 years now. I'm probably best known for the classic Game Room franchise, which has been running for about 25 years now, since 1999. Possibly the first internet video game review show on the internet, certainly the longest running, because it's still going in one form or another. At the moment in podcast form. Just like this. And why do a podcast? Well, I'll talk about that in a moment, but I've also produced documentaries, I've done visual arts work, comic book work, writing, and by trade, what I actually do for a living is publishing. I publish stuff. Mostly my own stuff, or a lot of my own stuff, but over the years, I just got into publishing, and now that's what I do. I publish. So I publish music, too. And I'm pretty excited about music publishing because music, unlike other forms of media, isn't really constrained. And that's kind of hard to explain, and maybe it'll take more than one podcast to really get there, but you can really go wild with music and just get away with it. And that's something you can't do in video. That's something you can't do if you're kind of locked into the influencer business. And that's something it's harder to do with the visual arts unless you're already established. But with music, you could just go nuts. And you can spread it across multiple platforms like Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, whatever. And every song is like a new way to possibly reach people. And that brings me to this podcast, which is I think a great way to reach new listeners, and also I think it's a good way to talk to existing listeners or fans or new fans or potential fans about the process and what goes into making Omega Ronin music. Additionally, I think it's very important to get out there with a podcast or some sort of social media exposure in some form to demonstrate that you are a human being creating music, because in addition to competing against a bazillion other artists out there, we're now also competing against the dreaded AI, which I have different opinions about AI and visual arts versus music. I'll talk about that later. They may not be popular opinions, but AI and music is like a musician's nightmare, because it's easy enough for somebody out there to just basically create a farm of computers that do nothing but generate AI content and then fill up the entire streaming services, all the streaming services, with just AI generated music. And that means it's harder to reach people. So when you do reach someone, I think that you need to just show them the process. Even if it's not glamorous or dramatic, even if you don't really like to present, even if you're not good on screen or whatever, just show how you're making the music. Now, I'm a lousy performer. I'm terrible at playing, which is why I rely heavily on sequencers, and I build a lot of songs as if I was building a video, like I was making a video. I've been editing videos since 1998, and I've done some film work in there with video editing as well. So I look at a music timeline in a DAW like I'm looking at video editing. I think they're exactly the same, and they hit the same part of my brain. But I show that every now and then. I like to work with hardware synthesizers, and then I use layers. I record something with a sequencer, drop it in, record like the bass line with the sequencer, drop that in, record something else and put that on top of it, mix it, play with it, and just, fiddle with this stuff like it was a glob of Play-Doh until it starts to form a song. And that's how all of the Omega Ronin albums are created. Sheer madness and a lack of professionalism. This song is titled Space Ninjas from Beyond Time, and the one before that is titled Inside the Love Robot. And yeah, all my music is science fiction inspired, every bit of it. Like everyone else in my generation, I grew up on Star Wars, when Star Wars was Star Wars. Not 1,000 spin-offs, but just legit old school Star Wars. In fact, the first movie I remember seeing in the theater with my dad is The Empire Strikes Back, which remains one of my favorite movies because it's, of course, one of the best movies ever made. One might say that it's totally Lando. So what gives me the right to record a podcast talking about music when I have no musical theory background? Well, you don't need a music theory background to make music, although I do have a hell of a lot of experience in producing, and I think that's very important. If you're coming at this business new, I think it's important. I think you need to be better at producing than making. Allow the making to sort of follow the producing. But that's my opinion. I'm sure other people will disagree with that. I grew up on MTV, listening to Duran Duran, Van Halen, Michael Jackson, Billy Idol, all the good stuff back in the day. So music has been a big part of my life. In fact, it's been an even bigger part of my life than video games. Music and movies. I'm an only child, so that was basically my diet for forever, was music and movies and video games. And that's what I write about. Mostly movie-inspired stuff, science fiction, robots, space robots from the future. That's about 95% of the Omega Ronin catalog, and the other 5% is inspired by Miami Vice and 1980s TV shows. Maybe that's a larger percentage. Maybe it's more like a 90-10, but I don't write about emotions or feelings or relationships or whatever. I've never had a heroin addiction, so I don't get to write about heroin, which always makes for good songs. But I do write a lot about space robots and black holes and just sheer madness. I mean, if we removed all of the songs out there inspired by heroin, I mean, we'd lose, the entire Guns N' Roses catalog, Ministry, so much good stuff. So I'm glad other people did the drugs so I don't have to. The song in the background is titled Blade Horizon, one of my more recent ones. And I'll walk you through some albums in upcoming podcasts, but one of the things I'm also experimenting with is visual projects like books, manga, that flow with the songs. And this song is actually a part of a project where there's visuals being created to match the music, and the music is inspired by the visuals that I was planning to create. Blade Horizon is the name of a spaceship in an upcoming Omega Ronin graphic novel. Like every series has to have like a starring spaceship, like the Millennium Falcon, Battlestar Galactica, Airwolf, even though it's not technically a spaceship. I think Airwolf could fly in space if given the chance. As this podcast progresses, I'll also talk about the hardware, and in fact, I'm going to show some of that today, because I'm not going to hit all this stuff in the first episode here. This is like an introduction. Omega Ronin started out. I talk about the history here of Omega Ronin. It's still a relatively new project for me, but one that has taken off relatively quickly and shows great promise. And from I have to act as an artist and a business person on a project like this, so I'm thrilled as the artist who gets to make this because it's tons of fun. I think it sounds really good, and people seem to enjoy it. On the business side, like I said, I love the music publishing and producing business, provided it's not like the sole business that I'm in. If that makes any sense. I wouldn't rely on it 100%, but there's just so much potential. And unlike a lot of other things I've worked on, music has a very small footprint in that it's just not a really like once you've created something, it's not really taxing to get it out there and support it, unlike video, which is just a nightmare. Audio is just like this little thing that can just fly away and take off. And I think that should be part of your business model. Just make it and then release it into the wild and see what happens. Good luck. You'll need it. Omega Ronin started as one of my many electronic music projects that I created a couple years ago, about 3 years ago, when I made up this ridiculous social media plan to use music and social media for marketing, print work, and other projects that my publishing company publishes. And this kind of worked in some ways, and it didn't work in other ways. But what did work out of this is that I created a band called Turbo Volcano, like a fake band, which was just wacky, experimental, like industrial style electronica music. It was very hard to classify though, and never really caught on. Immediately afterwards, I started tinkering with more specific genres, because that was always my problem with Turbo Volcano, was people would ask, what is it? And I'm like, I don't know. It's weird. But I started looking at ambient and lo-fi and synthwave. And these are all like very simple musical genres. That they can sound really good, so don't take that as me saying that they're not good. But I mean, musically, structurally, they're just very basic musical genres. Now they don't need to be. And again, this isn't me saying that there's not a lot of very good synthwave and ambient and lo-fi or whatever out there. You can put as much into it as you can put into it. But they also can be stripped down into very simple songs. And that's where I started with Omega Ronin, was very simple synthwave. I was like, all right, there's a synthwave genre. I mean, I like this sound. Everybody likes this sound. It sounds good. There's these beautiful swelling pads and lots of reverb, and like you can hide all kinds of musical mistakes in there, you know? So I made a very basic album called Halcyon Sunrise, and it just slowly gained a few fans out there. Like, I'm not even sure how. I logged in to my Spotify one day, and I'm like, Turbo Volcano's not doing anything, but all of a sudden Omega Ronin's like got a couple like big listeners in Japan. I'm like, what the hell? How's this happening? So what I did is I started to just dig into it and take it more seriously. Made a bunch of Turbo Volcano albums and Omega Ronin albums, just kind of side by side, back to back. I worked a lot with Korg Gadget early on, one of my favorite software packages, because it locks you into a key. And that's great for those of us with no musical theory knowledge. It's a really good learning tool, and it also just makes things pretty quick. Some of the best Turbo Volcano songs that I ended up actually remaking as Omega Ronin songs, like Beneath the Lava Waves and Psycho Crystals, all came out of Korg Gadget as Turbo Volcano songs. And then as I got better at producing, like a year later, I remade them all on like a bigger hardware Juno synthesizer, which is why they sound so damn good now. And synthwave is also a genre where the hardware does make a huge difference. Anyway, it was not an overnight success. In fact, I would still say it's got a long way to go before it's a success, but it's a growing project and one that I'm very happy with. And I just kind of stuck with Omega Ronin, and I dug in, and I just worked to improve every single album, and I tried new things, I worked with new tools, and I think the album Syntax Rhythm is where the Omega Ronin sound really started to emerge as a more serious sound. Because this is the album where I just figured out how to make it bigger. After Syntax Rhythm, I continued to push the sound bigger and just wider, and used some different tools, and again just dug into the producing aspect a bit more and came up with this next collection of songs, which I think kind of bridges the gap between the first 5 albums, Halcyon Sunrise, On the Line, Undercover Eyes, this time it's Personal, Syntax Rhythm, and then it's A New Hope Never Fades, which is a combination Star Wars and Joy Division reference. But this one's got some slower, just really dramatic tunes on there that, they're these kinds of songs that I made, and then I listen to them again, and it's like, I can't believe I actually made that. Not really sure how I did it, but somehow I did it, and here it is. The next couple albums are where I started to really get into the 3D animation side of things, and I was creating like this dystopian cyberpunk kind of Blade Runner-esque landscape in Unreal, and using that in some social media stuff. And in my mind, there was like this narrative story behind the music about these futuristic space robots. And that brings me to the album Touch the Mainframe, where I created the first Omega Ronin song with voice using a vocoder, and just the funky, like weird sounds moving in the background are me messing with the knobs on the TR-8S drum machine. This is Future Computer. another one of those songs I'm proud of. I'm not really sure how I did it, but somehow it got done. From there, I created a couple other EPs, and I'm pretty fond of the album Skywarp, which includes this song, Skywarp. That's all at the end of 2022, where I spent a lot of time on music producing and sunk a lot into new hardware as well. So I entered 2023 with a bunch of unfinished songs, but my 2023 plan ended up changing a bit, and I kind of forced myself back into video, which I have some mixed opinions about. I'm very passionate about filmmaking and video, but the video business has been altered significantly by cell phones and influencers, so that's just changed the whole landscape. So what happens is that traditional video is very time-consuming and extremely expensive to produce. So I got sucked into video, and by the time I realized I was into it again, I also realized what was involved, just the time commitment. And though Omega Ronin music worked well with the videos, the 2023 crop of videos, I found that I didn't have as much time to spend on the music specifically. So there's this one oddball album in there called Collision Course, which I've heard from several fans out there that it's their favorite album. It was like a collection of stuff that I didn't use for Skywarp, that I was kind of sitting on for the next few albums but hadn't finished, and most of the album is written in Korg Gadget, which is not the case anymore. But this one includes, I think, a fan favorite and one of my favorites. A song that just, when you get it right, you just get it right. And I think I got this one right. Beneath the Lava Waves. One friend of mine put it, 11 minutes of awesome. That track is also used as the background music for the classic Game Room 2085 Blu-ray set, the Season 1 Blu-ray set. Works perfectly with a spinning disco ball in space. So for most of 2023, I ended up doing classic Game Room producing and trying to fit that into my schedule with my regular job in the print publishing, and it just really turned into kind of a spaghetti mess, to be honest. Should have picked one or the other. I wrote a lot of music in the background, and at some point in late summer 23, maybe early fall, I had enough music to put together like 2 big albums, and that's where we get Iron Metropolis and Cosmic Starfighter back to back. And those are both heavily produced on Juno X and Matriarch, a lot of Matriarch bass. And that kind of stuff takes, the bigger keyboards take more time to use. So I'm not sure exactly how I got these things done. They're both double albums, but here's a quick listen to Iron Metropolis. Iron Metropolis has been the most successful album to date, definitely. Great album art, that really turned out well, nice selection of songs, and if you like Iron Metropolis, Cosmic Starfighter's like the same kind of album, made in the same period. That was the end of 23. Now the beginning of 24 is interesting because that's when I launched the 25th anniversary of Classic Game Room with Classic Game Room 2085 Season 2 on YouTube. Heavily produced. It took about 3 weeks to make the first episode, and the animations and title cards, built some new studio space. that I engineered to double duty as Omega Ronin studio space. Did a lot of on-camera work, super heavy editing job, and the first episode came out around New Year's, and, well, it didn't do as expected, let's just say that. Though fans liked it. I think it's a good show. I think it turned out really well. It cost a lot to make. It took a lot of time, and that's the kind of show that needs like 1 million views, not 5,000. So I immediately had to scale it back and cut the budget. And then I scaled it back again. And then again. And again. And all the while, Omega Ronin's like quintupled in size in the last 6 months. And like I got really comfortable with not just the producing, but actually playing the music. Or at least playing it in a recording space. So I started to come up with some really cool songs, I think. Some bigger songs going off in a different direction than the early synthwave. This is one of those songs, one of my favorites, titled Neutron Mindscape. That's all I got for the first podcast. The latest Omega Ronin album is all 16-bit video game music, where I created the entire album on the Sonicware Mega Synthesis. So it sounds totally different than all of the other ones. And the next one that I'm producing right now is a darker style, so it's really more like a dark wave, synthwave style, and very cinematic, very deep and brooding. So it's also a very different kind of album. I don't like to do the same thing over and over again, and there's no reason I have to. I just keep cranking out music, and I'm having fun doing it, and it's working. So I never thought that my visual arts career would turn into an audio arts career, but I've been through a couple different phases of my career at this point. So here we are. Let's have fun. And here's a clip of a track of something I'm working on right now. So this doesn't even have a name. But this is a listen to what you can expect in the next album. And this is the bass section, the rhythm section, some effects, rough drums, and there's going to be a huge lead on top of it, but I haven't written that yet. So this is mostly Matriarch. Straight up analog, and nothing else sounds quite like it. That's all for today, and next week hopefully talk a bit more about crafting sounds, about the production process, and we'll take it from there. Thanks for listening to the first Omega Ronin, the podcast, and hopefully you'll check out Omega Ronin, the music, out there on all the major streaming services and Bandcamp, and there's even some stuff on YouTube at Omega Ronin Music, the channel, Omega Ronin Music. So, see you next time. Thanks for listening. I'm going to leave you with this one.